Dear ones, I'm happy to announce that we have completed a book on life-serving boundaries. I'm feeling inspired and excited to share this with you and to share the gifts of so many collaborators that came forth to create this book. And my hope is that as we become ever more clear about what's life-serving and have a clear no with each other regarding what's not life-serving and have a very clear yes regarding what is life-serving, that we will begin to have a sense of fully being ourselves, authentically from our hearts, while fully being in relationship with others and compassion and connection, and enter into a synergistic relationship in community and in care and lovingness. So I hope you'll be inspired to take a look at our book and and perhaps receive the gifts that we're offering if it's right for you at this time. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to Relationships as Spiritual Practice, Bridging the Secular and Spiritual, with your host, Alia Lowe Chardet, founder of Mindful Compassionate Dialogue and the Wise Heart Community.
Welcome back. Thank you for being here. Happy to be with you today and talking about 4 points for distinguishing mutual from transactional relationships. So, first, I'd like to say a little bit about why this distinction is important, and then I'll do a brief overview of the 4 points, and then we'll dive in a little deeper. So, for me, when I think of a transactional relationship, I'm thinking of our monetary system and how so much of how we meet our needs is based on I give you money and you give me X, right? A service, a product. And so that transactional quality has a sense of, or can have, sense of indifference, separation, entitlement, objectification. This kind of a sterile functionality. So when we're examining our relationships and we recognize, oh, I want mutuality in our relationships, then if you're really examining, well, what does it mean to have a mutually satisfying relationship? You might naturally ask this question, well, what is mutuality relative to this transaction, this for that kind of relationship accounting, right? And I'm guessing in your heart, you have a sense like, oof, I want mutuality, but I don't want that, like having a relationship accounting ledger of who did what for whom when, and is it equal or fair or whatever, in that very kind of sterile way. So that's what's bringing us into this question and the idea of making this distinctions, which somebody wrote in and asked for this podcast. So thank you for that. Okay, let's jump in to 4 points. Oh, 3 points, I guess. 3 points, 3 major points, many individual points for the difference between a transactional view of relationship and the tracking and valuing of mutuality. The first is that a transactional relationship is organized around single instances of this for that, and that has a closing. And then that interaction is closed. When we're seeking mutuality in a relationship, we're oriented towards the quality of care in an interaction, and we're holding that quality of care as ongoing, evolving, and opening or open. Okay, number 2. Transactional interactions often equate equal and same. Equal is same. So as long as we do the same thing, then we're equal. A strategy for achieving equity by making everything look the same externally, right? Or the same amount of money is exchanged, or products or services, etc. When we're tracking mutuality, equal and fair is seen through the lens of what each person can offer based on their unique capacities and their level of privilege or oppression. So we're really looking at the complexity of equal and fair relative to the systems of privilege or oppression that a person lives in, their own unique gifts, talents, and capacities. Could be physical, emotional, spiritual, energetic, right? And we're also looking at the needs that live for each person in a given moment and in a given context. And that's how we're having a sense of fairness or equity. And the last point is giving and receiving in a transactional relationship is measured by quantity. It's a number. Time spent, materials used, effort invested, things like frequency and duration, right? Okay. And then when we're tracking mutuality, giving and receiving is held broadly relative to time. It might be held within a number of weeks, months, years, or even held within stages of life. I'm thinking of a parent-child relationship, right? Stages of life is how mutuality is often held. Not that it's not held in those other ways as well, but just to give a sense. And giving and receiving is noticed relative to the felt sense of generosity, attunement to needs, and depth of nourishment received. Okay, let's dive in. Are you ready? Dive into the first point. So let's look at transactional relationships with this idea of single instances, and then the relationship is closed. So the dangers in this kind of interacting is that we start to see other people as a means to an end rather than people, as objects, as variables in our life that we have to deal with, right? I've seen a bumper sticker that says, hell is other people. That's a really good example of a thought someone would have when they're caught in that idea that life is a series of transactions, right? If life is a series of transaction, you don't want another person there. A robot would be better because it would be more efficient, right? It's a very lonely way to view life. Lacking that connection and compassion, lacking curiosity. And so when there's that transaction, not only does the person become objectified, but the service or the product being exchanged is seen as separate as well, seen as something that lives apart from relationship and therefore has no sacred value. And from here, we have our throwaway mentality, right? Oh, I'll just get another one at the store. It's no big deal. Like everything can be replaced is the mentality. Oof. Oh, when we have that mentality, we live a brokenhearted life, right? Because we're so disconnected from the vibrancy that lives within every single thing. And then we have giant landfills and kind of a callousness with which we go through life. Also, in this transactional relationship, entitlement comes into being. Thoughts of deserve, phrases like, I don't owe you anything, I deserve service now, right? You have these experiences of demanding customers, or you yourself become a demanding customer. I paid, therefore I deserve. Ooh, so violent, so painful, so divorced from a sense of collaborating to create the world we dream of living in. And then the last point I want to make about what can be so toxic about seeing interactions as transactions is that we can have a attitude of, it doesn't matter how this person treats me or how I treat them, because I'll never have to deal with them again. Wow. It's such an entrenchment in separation. Yeah, painful. Even if you never see a person again, you are in intimate relationship with them every breath you take as a part of a vast and infinite matrix of life. So these are the dangers of this idea of a single instance of interaction. So let me go to how mutuality would live with regards to that, kind of the opposite and exclusive point. So we said mutuality, in contrast, has an open and ongoing quality of care that evolves, right? Care is understood relative to each person's unique capacity and to the systems that they operate in and come from. And when an exchange occurs, or when we don't even say exchanged when we're in this consciousness, we say, when you'd like to give a gift, that gift is soaked in the context from which it was offered. There's information, there's consideration, intention, and that offering has a unique signature of the giver. Value of what is offered is bestowed upon that thing by the relationship itself, not the thing itself. And so a very critical point here is that that interaction is a conscious choice. to connect rather than a way to get something, right? Have you ever had the thought, oh, I just want to do it myself because I don't want to deal with a person, right? I would invite you, if you're living in a world of the consciousness of connection, to just check in with that thought and say, ah, what need am I trying to meet here? Oh, I really want efficiency so that I can care for these other needs later, rather than I don't want to have to deal with the person. It's okay. We don't need to connect with everyone all the time. And at the same time, there's this dropping in to your own needs, right? And coming from that sense of care. Okay. And the next point that we talked about was equal as same as far as transactional relationships are concerned, right? There's this equivalent as equal and same. Oh, when we imagine in this transactional view of the world that equity is created by sameness, we are creating a systemic form of blindness. That systemic blindness contains the damaging idea that everyone has an equal chance to earn access to resources. It really ignores the idea, or it ignores, the existence of racism, sexism, and other systemic forms of oppression and violence. And it contains this very violent idea of deserve, which I originally learned from Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of Nonviolent Communication, as the most violent concept on our planet. The idea of deserve. I deserve what I get. Or others deserve punishment. As soon as you enter into the mentality of deserve, you're imagining that you can assign reward and punishment based on an assessment of the value of a living being. Whoa. If you can choose the value of a living being, you can choose to devalue them and treat them as objects. And that's why we have things like slavery and genocide and on and on and on. So this violent idea of deserve comes along with transactions and the idea that equal is same. Scary idea, violent idea. Okay. So let's look at that relative to mutuality and dive in a little more. From the perspective of mutuality, equal is not same. Equity is not produced by sameness. Discerning about how you would like to contribute and what you would like to receive is not based on a quantifying of the giving. This is a really difficult point, I think. Very difficult to live from a depth of groundedness in your own choice to contribute. It's so conditioned into us that we contribute based on transaction. So it's really, really hard sometimes to find your own desire. And the process of discerning to contribute to another, to give something to another. Let's check in with that. For me, lives as a checking in with your heart and your root, your center, and noticing, oh, is there this complete free quality of giving? I'm going to describe the ideal first, understanding that there's a huge continuum, right? I'm pointing to this autonomy, right? This really conscious choice and agency to give. You deciding where to put your energy. And so this, for me, it might be a really central crux of mutuality. Often we're deciding to put our energy in relationships or situations where we're confident the energy will flow. And really, I don't believe that it's about flowing back to you. It's an incredible clarity that if let's say someone asks, can we have a call and have a half hour of empathy? Most people don't get that specific in their asks. But let's imagine. And you're discerning, oh, do I want to offer this? And the conditioned transactional mind says, well, but this person doesn't do much for me. And when I asked them to do such and such, they did not say yes, and so on, right? You start to do the relationship accounting. And so often, if you do accounting, your heart will start to close and you'll feel a tightness and a tension, resentment, or maybe guilt, right? If you're seeing the ledger as the other direction. So there's just to name that. Oh, there's the transactional mind. Let me just set that aside. And then asking yourself the question, if I give my energy in this direction, do I feel a sense of flow? That my gift will flow through that person to really enhance their own life or flow through them to the next person. Sometimes we don't have that information. So there's a little something to keep in your pocket for tracking mutuality. Does your contribution help the resources move? For example, I'm hoping by offering this podcast that I'm helping resources move in a large way by opening up the access to particular perspectives, sense of love and care, and trusting actually, that will be in the flow. Okay, that was kind of long. How did that land for you? You want to take a moment? Okay, let me offer another point there. Your sense of being nourished is yours to manage. And hopefully you're making requests from others to meet your needs rather than just expecting or hoping nourishment will come your way. You're noticing how you're nourished and in what relationships. And you're choosing to spend time there to receive that nourishment as it's offered from the generosity of that person's heart. So this, we're getting a little bit into the giving and receiving here. I don't want to get ahead of myself. And at the same time, as we come out of transaction, we're really diversifying our sense of how we're nourished. We're really getting subtle about that. Okay, I'm just going to leave that there for now and we'll do our last point. With giving and receiving, as we talked about with regard to transactional relationships, is measured by quantity, time spent, materials used, effort invested, frequency, all these things you can measure with a number. And when we're doing that, the dangers are triggering scarcity, right? Because actually, your well-being and your security will never be found in numbers. And there's a you in there that knows that. So as you attempt to shore yourself up by doing some relationship accounting, you become tense and tight and contracted and move into a fear of scarcity. That's inevitable. Also, along with this transactional sense of giving, receiving, comes the fear of being used. And in fact, that is part of the monetary system. That is part of capitalism, that you are a laborer being used to create products, to create profit for we don't know what, right? It's just a whole idea. It's not an actuality of how we thrive. So anyone in a transactional relationship has a sense of being used. Horrible feeling, right? Horrible sense. Denying our sacredness. And the last thing I'll say about giving and receiving in transactional orientations is that it triggers a fragmented sense of self. And when you are just aspects of yourself and not your whole self, right? You're just the aspect of yourself that hands that person their change, or the aspect of yourself that purchases that item. You're identified with this small piece of yourself, and it's very hard to receive nourishment when you're identified with a small part of yourself. Very difficult. And so it creates this domino effect of tiredness, depletion, exhaustion. Okay. Giving and receiving within a mutual relationship, like I said before, may be tracked at a variety of timescales and all at once, right? In weeks and years and minutes, stages of life. And it's noticed relative to that sense of care, generosity, a true openness to giving and receiving. So we talked already a little bit about the consciousness of giving coming from that deep sense of connection with flow. It's the same for the consciousness of receiving. Yeah. When you're truly receiving, you're just sitting back in yourself and you're orienting to the gift and the offering in this very open way. You're trusting the nourishment there in an undefended way. I certainly wasn't born knowing how to do that. Most of us don't grow up in environments in which nourishment comes attuned to the need present in us in the right way, the right amount, the right time, right? And so most of us have learned to mistrust an offering and to defend ourselves around an offering as not being right. And so we live depleted there often in any relationship, which is the very thing that has us grabbing for the transactional relationship. Like, I want some accounting. I'm not nourished. I did this for you. You should do this for me. Like, that's why we get caught in this tit for tat. It's painful. And so giving and receiving within mutuality is a sort of dance, right? That you're constantly doing. And this infinity loop just comes right into my mind of I'm offering from the autonomous generosity of my heart. And then I'm opening and relaxing back as I receive your smile, your hug, your celebration of my offering. And then I'm offering that care for you, that attentiveness to you. And then I'm sitting back as I'm receiving care and attentiveness, maybe not even from the other person that I just offered to, maybe from somewhere else. So again, I'm just going to go to the ideal, and then I'll get specific with the logistics and the day-to-day. So in this realm where we are living in this infinity loop of offering and receiving, going into this deep giving from the autonomous generosity of our heart, connected to the flow, the movement of energy and resources, and then sitting back in our hearts and opening to the receiving without defendedness. Wow. When we're there, mutuality is a given. It's unquestionable. It's just a state of the universe. Okay, I'm just going to let that sit in your heart for a moment. If you're willing, just for a moment to let go of daily life and just let your heart land in that absolute quality of the infinite flow of giving and receiving, offering, and being nourished. Okay. So let's move now into how this mutuality might live for you in a given relationship. Let's take a friendship as an easier context, perhaps, at least for me. So you have a friendship, and let's imagine you're saying, I'm just doing a lot of giving in this relationship. This person isn't holding space for me when I offer to hear them, then they don't ask about my life. And we go for a walk together, and the whole time I'm just giving them empathy and listening and being curious about their lives. And it's just not happening in reverse. So then the first question I would offer for you to ask there is that what you want from that person in particular? So I just want to break that little automatic, I've given, so I want them to give back. I want to break that up with the question, is that what you really want from that person? So it begs the question, who do you want to receive nourishment from? Or maybe who are you already receiving it from? And so if your answer is yes, then I'm just going to encourage you to keep examining. And to what end? To what end do you want to be seen and known and held by this person in the way that you are seeing and knowing them? Sounds kind of funny, sounds a little transactional. To what end, doesn't it? Let me say it a different way. What are you envisioning that you want to create with this person that has you wanting to receive their care, being seen, known, listened to, whatever other need? I'm just naming some of the top needs in friendship. Maybe you want to create this beautiful intimacy, right? This playing field of discovering together the layers of who you are and healing together what's alive, what's present. You want to live in this dance. That sounds fun. I certainly like that. So if that's what you're imagining, then yeah, then maybe you get curious about the capacities of that person to live in that dance with you and their own desire to live in that dance with you. It's something you want, but have you asked them if they want that? So maybe the next encouragement would be to present your vision. Not just, would you be willing to listen to me too, or whatever the thing is, right? But rather the vision you have for your relationship with this person. And ask if they also have that desire, if they want to create that. They might say yes, and then they might not actually have the skills or the capacity to hold you in the way you want to be held. So that's the next point of discernment. Ooh, I've presented my vision of what I want to create in this particular relationship. And the person has said yes. And I was like, yeah, that's fantastic. And then the next time we went for a walk together was exactly the same. And you're like, oh, that wasn't moving towards what they agreed they wanted to create. So then you have another step of how do we want to create this together? And you have your idea of, you ask me questions about your life. You want to understand why I value something the way I do. You want to offer me empathy. You have all the ways that gets created for you. And so you might want to check in like, ooh, are those strategies things they're willing to offer? Have the skill and capacity to offer? Are they able to attune to you in the way you would like? And are you doing that in the way they would like for this co-creation of a relationship? It's nice when it just happens. And when it doesn't, we have all these questions to ask, right? And we can use to investigate. What type of relationship? Let me say that differently. What do you want to create with a given person? I think we use mutualities as a shorthand for that. When we say, I want to create a mutual relationship with you, what we're really saying is, I have a particular vision for what we'll create together. And then hopefully you would share that, right? You would get very specific about that. It may be that the vision of what someone wants to create with you is a vision of mentorship in which they get to receive from you. Yeah, and they get to take the gifts that you give them and bring them into the world for others. There's all kinds of options out there. So all this gets ever more complex as we enter into systems of work and roles and responsibilities. Yeah. It's more than seems useful to cover in a single podcast. And so I just will leave you with some key thoughts for the complexity of those relationships. How conscious can you become of what you want to offer? And how conscious can you become of how, when, and from who you want to receive? Okay, dear ones, thank you for being with me. Hope this was helpful. I'm radiating love from my heart to yours.
You can learn more about Mindful Compassionate Dialogue and find free resources, live offerings, and self-paced workshops online at www.wiseheartcommunity.org.